Okay, there's a lot to this next story, and I want to make sure I get to everything. So, the big picture is that a bunch of senators have been caught selling huge amounts of shares of stock after getting a briefing about coronavirus. But while publicly, they and Donald Trump continued to claim everything's fine, we're prepared, this is no big deal. Now, these are mostly Republicans. There's a claim that Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein also did the same. But when I look at the details, it doesn't look like Dianne Feinstein is actually part of this crony crew. So let's start going through it. First of all, reports that Republican Senator Richard Burr sold somewhere between $600,000 and $1.7 million in stock after getting a bunch of briefings about how coronavirus was coming. But while publicly, Burr was still saying things like, the U.S. today is better prepared than ever before to face emerging public health threats like coronavirus. Privately, he was dumping stock, presumably in advance of the crash that ultimately came. And of course, that stock market crash did eventually happen. The coronavirus briefings included one on January 24th, also attended by Senators Kelly Loeffler, Republican, Ron Johnson, Republican, James Inhofe, Republican, Dianne Feinstein, Democrat. That gets us to James Inhofe. James Inhofe sold a whole bunch of stock in PayPal, Intuit, which makes TurboTax, Dana Corporation, Brookfield Asset Management, and Apple, of Tim Apple fame, of course. Kelly Loeffler tweeted about being at that briefing on January 24th. She said, quote, appreciate today's briefing from the president's top health officials on the novel coronavirus outbreak. These men and women are working around the clock to keep our country safe and healthy. She then started selling stock, but also buying stock in companies that would do well during during a time of quarantining and work from home. For example, buying shares of Citrix, which runs file sharing service ShareFile and remote access service LogMeIn. The 15 stocks that Loeffler reported selling have lost more than a third of their value on average since she reported selling them. We don't know the full scope of her portfolio changes and holdings. There's definitely an incomplete picture there. She later claimed that all of these decisions to buy and sell weren't made by her. She said on Twitter, quote, this is a ridiculous and baseless attack. I do not make investment decisions for my portfolio. Investment decisions are made by multiple third-party advisors without my or my husband's knowledge or involvement. That's her assertion. Then we get to Ron Johnson and Dianne Feinstein. Now, both of these situations seem different. Ron Johnson's thing seems different in that on March 2nd, that was well into this crisis, he sold a stake in his brother's company. That's a privately held company. The Ron Johnson thing seems like a different thing so far. And then there's Dianne Feinstein, the Democrat. Her husband sold biotech stock Allogene at a very low price. It actually went up after they sold it, then coming back down, currently trading slightly below where it was when they sold it. Maybe Dianne Feinstein told her husband what was going on, and they said, even though the stock is at like an all-time low at that point, let's sell it anyway. I don't know. It's far less obvious that Dianne Feinstein was doing the same thing. Now, it's really important to understand that a lot of people are debating, is this actually insider trading? Does this actually represent trading on inside knowledge about a particular company? But the thing that you have to remember is that members of Congress have a different set of rules they have to stick to. It's called the Stock Act. Stock is an acronym. It's the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act. Obama signed it into law, and it prohibits the use of any information that's not public for private profit. This includes insider trading by members of Congress and other government employees. It has a whole bunch of sections, which there's no sense in going through each section. But the point of the Stock Act is specifically to deal with situations not about a particular company. So you could argue it's not really insider trading. It's not, I found out Apple is about to have this issue. It's not public knowledge. I'm dumping my Apple stock. The normal sense of insider trading may not apply, but the Stock Act certainly does, where knowledge about a national security issue or a pandemic or whatever, you are not allowed to trade on that information for private profit. Insider trading, it can be debated. This is clearly a violation of the Stock Act by every indication, at least for Richard Burr and Loeffler. I got a ton of messages saying, yeah, but David, what are the consequences going to be? I think you all probably know the most likely outcome, which is nothing. Nothing's going to happen. We don't have an administration nor a justice department that has any appetite to go after stuff like this right now. Really, really ugly stuff. And I hope that I'm wrong about that. There has been a shareholder lawsuit filed against Richard Burr. From what I'm reading, legal analyses, it's not likely to go very far. But this is another way in which, we talk about two justice systems. We talk about a two-tiered economy, probably more than two tiers. This is another way in which the people in charge, the elites, have a completely different world in which they live. And not only do they live in a different world, that world is increasingly isolated from the consequences that people outside that world would typically have to deal with if they did the same thing. This is another example of that. And what is increasingly clear, as we'll talk about this later, and tomorrow, Donald Trump looks like he's ready to say no more distancing, let it rip, old people stay home, otherwise go crazy, which is extremely dangerous. Other than that, we are increasingly seeing that coronavirus may be very profitable for a lot of people, and in many different ways. Government slush fund contracts potentially going to be available soon to a lot of corporations. Insiders from the government making moves in terms of stocks to not necessarily always make money, but avoid the losses that many of us have suffered to our portfolios, et cetera. So that the two-tiered system, never more clear than now. Quick reminder, I hope that you are staying home. One of the things we've done is we've rescheduled the David Pakman Show viewer chess tournament to tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern, March 25, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll be playing in it and streaming my games. Anybody can play, regardless of skill level. I will tweet out the link at about 7:45 p.m. Eastern, Wednesday night. You can use that link to play. We'll be playing on leechess.org. So just grab subscribe, make an account. It's totally free. Make an account on leechess.org. And I hope you will join us tomorrow night for the David Pakman Show viewer chess tournament. In the meantime, let me know what you think about the Stock Act violation allegations. I'm on Twitter at @dpakman. If you ever feel like you just don't have enough time to read all the books you want to read, you have to check out one of my favorite apps called Blinkist. Blinkist takes thousands of popular nonfiction books and distills each one down into an ebook or audiobook that you can get through in just 15 minutes, where you're getting all the key takeaways from the book. Just imagine how you'll be able to expand your horizons and knowledge by being able to soak up all of the important insights from 10 different books in an afternoon. Obviously, it's perfect for exposing yourself to a new book you otherwise wouldn't have time for, or you can use it to revisit a book you've already read, or use it to preview a book before you buy the full version and read it. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.